Good evening and welcome to a special Inside the Issues edition of Tucker Carlson Tonight. Over the next hour, we'll take a deeper dive into some of the biggest matters affecting American life today. We start with speech. As you probably heard, recently many of the biggest tech companies joined in a coordinated effort to censor content from broadcaster Alex Jones. Apple, Facebook, Spotify, Vimeo, YouTube, Twitter, all of them pulled or froze Jones's accounts on the grounds that his views are too dangerous to be heard publicly. The left, which seeks to crush anything it can't control, applauded the news. The institutional right in Washington, afraid of being criticized, mostly stayed silent. That was foolish and it was cowardly. This isn't about Alex Jones or any one person. It's about the central principle of our society, and it's at stake here. Do people have a right to communicate their views? It doesn't matter what those views are, Alex Jones's views or anyone else's views. They may be misguided, they may be repugnant. Often they are. But there's a remedy for repugnant views. Make a counter case. Defeat bad ideas with good ideas. Kill lies with truth. That's how healthy societies function. We are moving in the opposite direction. Increasingly, the people in charge use technology to silence criticism, mostly of them. The left will tell you that defending Alex Jones's right to speak is the same as defending what Alex Jones says. That is a lie, and they know it's a lie. We would make the very same case on behalf of Jill Stein or Noam Chomsky on the left or anyone else the establishment was trying to silence. The left-wing ACLU spent about 100 years representing radical extremists whose views they hated, and they did it to make that point. Free speech is for everybody, even the crazies. That's the very definition of free speech. In a free country, everyone can be heard. In totalitarian societies, only the powerful can be heard. The left used to understand that, but they don't anymore. What changed? Why are the most powerful companies in the world suddenly so threatened by an independent radio show host in Texas that they're willing to lose business in order to make him shut up? And Jones is hardly their only target, that's for sure. Virtually every day, the big tech companies censor someone else whose political opinions they disagree with. You see it all the time. Last summer, the CEO of Google, who is a billionaire, by the way, flew home from family vacation just to fire a low-level programmer called James Damore. What did Damore do? His crime was writing a private memo that gently questioned identity politics. The reaction in both those cases, and many others like them, was weirdly disproportionate, almost hysterical. It was like shooting someone for looking at you funny. Confident people don't behave like that. Insecure, terrified people do. And that's the point. Our establishment crushes dissent not because our establishment is strong, but because it is weak and afraid. In the words of a Perceptive essay this week, quote, "Censorship is what happens when powerful people get scared." That piece was written by a former Wall Street executive called Michael Krieger, and it's worth quoting at length here. Elites aren't afraid of what Alex Jones says, Krieger writes. They're terrified that it's popular. They're in denial about the consequences of the world they created. Trump didn't divide American society. Alex Jones didn't cause our widespread and, by the way, justified distrust in institutions. Elites did that with their spectacular failures. Trump's election and Alex Jones's popularity are merely symptoms of a corrupt and failed status quo, the stewards of which refuse to take a look in the mirror, accept blame, and reform. Censorship by Silicon Valley billionaires will backfire spectacularly. Ultimately, it's safer for society to have open public forums where all ideas, whether you consider them dangerous and crazy or not, can be openly expressed alongside each other. Deplatforming popular content won't make it go away. It will just shift to areas of the internet you may not see, where it will fester and grow stronger over time and even more intense and radicalized echo chambers. You'll think it's gone from society because it's been safely cleansed from your corporate government Facebook timeline, but it may grow even stronger in the shadows, end quote. In other words, censorship does not work. Ideas spread. The good ones, which are rooted in nature and observable reality, take root and they endure. People know what's true. They can smell it. You can't stop them from knowing that. You can't control their minds. You can only humiliate yourself and undermine your own authority by trying. Our childish billionaire overlords may be geniuses, they say they are, but they don't understand that. Someday soon they will learn, and that is a comforting thought at a time like this. Joining us now is DePaul University professor Jason Hill. Professor, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
So tell us your view of why censorship from the left, but not exclusively from the left, but mostly, has increased. That doesn't seem like the sign of confidence. It seems like the sign of people who believe they're losing control.
Well, I think what has happened is that the right has lost the culture wars. I think that we are seeing a period since the 1964-65 period in which the free speech movement was fought, ironically, by the far left. We are under the nefarious control of a far left movement that is in exercising cultural power and is in control of our cultural institutions. And what we have are these institutions like Google, like Twitter, like YouTube, yielding to that cultural power out of fear of retribution or repercussions that they fear will have financial consequences. But make no mistake about it, we are in the throes of a far left that has exercised and is exercising great cultural power over our society. They have won the cultural wars.
What I don't understand is why people who dissent, who have different views, tend to be so passive in the face of attempts to shut them up. I understand why people don't like Alex Jones. I'm not defending Alex Jones's views, obviously. But if they can silence a radio show host, or if they can silence James Damore, the engineer at Google, why can't they silence you? Or why can't they silence me? Of course they can. Why don't we fight back against this?
We can't fight back because we don't have the moral courage to fight the opposition. We are apologists for our values and we're apologists for our principles.
Yes.
We have ceded the moral high ground to the adversary, and in some sense we have given them the moral authority out of some sense of cowardice. I think there's a great deal of moral cowardice that conservatives have, that people who are even mildly conservative have, and we have ceded the moral high ground to people who have co-opted values and principles in the name of some sort of morality that is nothing short of nihilism, cultural relativism, an attack on reason, and an attack on rational argumentation. But it's a lack of courage, and it's a lack. Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. But if all people who dissented from the prevailing view of say, our tech billionaires who have so much control over our speech, paused and said, you know, I'm not actually going to go along with this. You don't have the moral high ground over me, and I am going to say what I think. I'm going to say it even louder if you try and silence me. I mean, you could actually make some headway fighting back against it, couldn't you?
You could, but I think the point I'd like to reiterate is that we don't really realize the kind of cultural power that is being exercised and the kind of intimidation tactics that is exercised and wielded over people who have dissenting views. There is a kind of hijacking of one's moral conscience that has to be reckoned with. And I think until people who hold conservative values or people who are on the other side of the spectrum say, no, this is wrong, free speech has got to be defended, and whether it's even, I would go as far, Tucker, as to say even hate speech, so long as it's not an incitement to violence.
I appreciate you, Professor, for reminding us of that. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We want to hit another topic that has emerged again and again in the news recently: socialism. Socialism, of course, has a century-long track record of creating human misery and destroying countries, from Russia to Venezuela. But the ideology has proven impossible to kill, and it is flourishing, or appears to be flourishing, in the modern Democratic Party. Democrats as a whole now say they view socialism more favorably than they do capitalism. Politicians like Bernie Sanders and Cynthia Nixon proudly call themselves socialists.
Maybe there's a little taint to socialism that turns people off.
I don't really think so. I think the real issue is that the ideas that we have been talking about, almost without exception, Stephen, are now ideas that are mainstream ideas that are supported by the vast majority of the American people.
Republicans are going to call us socialists no matter what we do. So we might as well give them the real thing.
Give them the real thing. But what is the real thing? And what are they talking about when they say they are socialists? David Azarad has thought a lot about this. He's director of the B. Kenna Simon Center for Principles and Politics at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, and he joins us tonight. David, thank you for coming on. So all of us have watched kind of slack-jawed as a growing number of ascendant Democratic politicians have embraced socialism. What are they saying when they say they're socialists? What does that mean?
I think you should look at the policies they support rather than the labels they use. And there you'll find that what they're calling socialism is basically just liberalism. They want more regulations on the private sectors, and they want bigger entitlements. So basically, socialism has become a synonym for a more aggressive, self-confident brand of liberalism, and it's definitely spreading. But Marxist-Leninist socialism, the intermediary stage on the way to communism, that's completely dead in the U.S. and enjoys almost no support. So I would tell my friends on the right not to panic that this is not the birth of communism. What it is just is a renascent, more aggressive form of progressivism. No more Bill Clinton, the era of big government is over, but an assertive and demanding and self-confident form of liberalism.
It does seem like, though, somebody has failed. Maybe it was parents, maybe it was teachers, maybe it was both, in making the term socialism unacceptable. I mean, no one is espousing Nazism. That's been obviously discredited, and for good reason. Socialism, self-described socialists, murdered tens of millions of people in the last 100 years. Why is the word itself not more verboten?
I mean, look at what we teach in our schools. By and large, there are only three things that kids learn about the past: Nazism, Jim Crow, and slavery. And they know that that's bad. Socialism killed and communism killed 100 million people in the 20th century, but that's not really taught. And then the other thing to keep in mind is 2008. 2008 happens, and immediately the left reacted and said, this is capitalism. This is the legacy of Reagan. Right. This is unregulated greed. It's the private sector running amok and trampling over the well-being of Americans. And then the pollsters come along and they give the American people a choice between capitalism, which to many on the left and to millennials means 2008, or socialism, which has come to mean kind of, we're all in this together, we take care of one another, or the government gives us free stuff. And people say, well, I sure as hell am not going to support capitalism, therefore I'm going to support socialism. I think it's more an indictment of our failure to properly teach history. And look, the fact also that words evolve and their meaning changes over time. And I think today, for a lot of people, socialism just means big government.
Libertarians and some conservatives never really reckoned with the deep resentment about the bank bailouts, I always thought. Did it ever occur to them that, you know, people looked at that, if you're a non-economist like me, and you think, well, if my business fails, no one bails me out, but we're bailing out these billion-dollar banks? I mean, people kind of hated that, and why wouldn't they?
And I also think we didn't offer a simple counter-narrative. I mean, there have been very intelligent and profound explanations offered on the right by economists of what happened. But to put it bluntly, what's our talking point? And I've been in D.C. now for 10 years. I still don't know what it is. So that I think in the popular consciousness, 2008 was caused by deregulation and greed, which I think you and I both know is not the case. But we kind of lost that battle.
David Azarad, one of the smartest observers of all this. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
Our Inside the Issue special continues just ahead with a look at big tech. Even when you think your phone is not listening to you, it likely is. We've been investigating this for months, and that investigation continues after the break. Welcome back to our Inside the Issue special edition of Tucker Carlson Tonight. The people who run the tech industry already know a lot more about you and your neighbors and your family than the East German Stasi ever could have dreamed, but they're always looking for more information. And for most people, the smartphone is the way they get it. Your phone doesn't just track where you go, though it does do that. It can also listen in on your conversations, your in-person conversations, and use them to decide which ads you see online. Brett Larson hosts Fox News Headlines 24/7 on Sirius XM Radio. He frequently investigates tech stories for us. So, Brett Larson, I know this can't be true because we've suspected this for a long time, but the industry has denied it repeatedly.
Right.
But you're saying it is real?
They have denied, but every time someone sits down and researches it, it seems it is actually happening. That the conversations that you're having in front of your smartphones are being listened to, and then advertisements appropriate to the conversations you had will pop up the next time you go online.
Wait, can I just interrupt you just to make sure I have this right? So this is not when you're speaking to Siri, not when you're talking to the phone, but when your phone is sitting on a table in a restaurant in your
like
home.
right here,
and you don't
hearing me.
Even now, but how is that legal?
You know, here's the thing. This is where, and when we had Mark Zuckerberg in Congress, Congress said over and over these end-user agreements that we all just kind of click through and we don't pay attention. For what we know, it could be buried in there, but it could be buried in there in such a way that you don't really understand what they're saying. When you open an app for the first time, when you download the Facebook app, for example, and you open it for the first time, it may say, Facebook app would like access to your camera and your microphone. And logically, you're going to think, oh, it's because I want to put pictures on Facebook directly from the app. But buried in that license agreement, it may say flat out, and you know, we're listening to the things going on around you when you post your photos, so that we can take the mood of the room, or so that you're not posting a silent movie, basically. But this reporter at Vice Media did the same thing, and he did it the same way. All of us have heard this story over and over, these anecdotal things of like, you know, I was talking about wanting to go to Japan, and the next thing I know, I'm in front of my computer and there's all these ads for cheap flights to Japan. And most of us dismiss it of like, there's no way that could be happening. Zuckerberg's in Congress. He says, there's no way we're not listening to you. But other researchers have found that a lot of these apps are actually listening to us, and they're also paying attention to how we interact with the app. They're going to excuse it away. They're paying attention to how we use the app. They want to make the app a better user experience. I totally get that. They're listening to us. Our phones are always listening to us because they're listening for that magic word. They're listening for OK Google to alert the virtual assistant, or Hey Siri, which if I say, my phone's gonna, now there it goes. It's what can I help you with? But in order for my phone to hear me say that, it's got to be listening to me all the time. So it's a matter of what other apps are also listening and what they're called trigger words to get them to start paying attention. For all we know, the Facebook app trigger is, I'm thinking about, and then the next thing is what they're listening for.
Yeah, but I guess that's the point we don't know. And by the way, Congress banned lawn darts and clove cigarettes because they were a danger to the public, but they've done nothing about this because they're pathetic in the pocket of these companies. But let me ask, where does this data go? They have all your conversations, all your intimate conversations. What do they do with it?
They take it back, they process it, and they sell you advertisements. That's, you know, when we did that investigation into Google and tracking your location, it's really about, they want to know where you go, they want to know your routine, because then they have a more valuable sell to an advertiser. You're not just going to a fast food restaurant and saying, we're going to give you 1,000 customers. You're going to a fast food restaurant and saying, we're going to give you 100 customers that absolutely walk past your store every day, and 10 of them walk in once a week, and we know this for a fact. Now they can go a step further and say, of those 10 that we know walk into your store, one of them is actually talking in the morning about how he wants to get breakfast at your particular establishment, and they have all this data.
Why would any sane person ever bring a smartphone into a bedroom? Seriously.
I know. It's a valid question, and when you, Tucker, when you think about it, we've got baby cams, pet cams, all these things in our homes connected to the internet. We don't know where that's going. So my advice would be turn the phone off if you're bringing it in the bedroom, because it is probably listening to. And I'm not trying to sound alarmist. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Well, you're the opposite of an alarmist. I'm alarmed. I'm terrified. And I'm upset that Congress doesn't care enough to do something about this. Brett Larson,
need to get savvier about it, indeed.
You think? It's insane.
Yeah.
Thank you for your relentless investigations. I appreciate them.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
Up next, the war in Afghanistan continues to drag on. 17 years and counting, billions and billions of dollars. Is victory anywhere in sight? What should we do about America's longest war? Our Inside the Issues special continues just ahead. Welcome back to our Inside the Issues special hour. It really grabs headlines anymore, but thousands of American troops continue to wage war in Afghanistan. It costs more than $40 billion a year. That's enough to pay for 2 walls in the Mexican border, enough to do a lot of things. Victory, though, seems as far off as ever. maybe farther away than ever as Taliban forces control huge swaths of the countryside. They recently laid siege to Ghazni, a major city less than 100 miles from the capital, Kabul. President Trump promised in 2016 to keep the U.S. out of foreign quagmires, but what can he do about this quagmire that he inherited? We spoke recently with Eric Prince, who founded the private military firm Blackwater and is an expert on the country of Afghanistan. Eric Prince joins us tonight. Eric, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Tucker, thanks for having me.
So, you're one of the few people I know who's paying close attention to what's happening in Afghanistan. The president gets elected a year and a half ago, partly on the promise to reassess Afghanistan. Pentagon asks him more time, more troops. What's the result of that? Is it turning around?
Look, the president got bad advice a year ago. He originally was going to go with his instincts, which was to do something different, something unconventional. He was very deliberate about the decision-making process, but in the end, they rolled him. And after a year more, another $62 billion of spending, more dead Americans and lots of dead Afghans, we are losing. The Taliban showed that very strongly again this week. They kill another 350 Afghan soldiers, 4 districts taken. They effectively cut the country in half by cutting a major city. And just this week also killed 50 kids in Kabul studying or taking a college entrance exam. So the country continues to melt down. The conventional approach is not working. For the last 17 years, we basically repeated the Soviet battle plan, and it's not working. So it's time for the president to make some choices.
So what's the thinking here? So as you said, it's been next month it will be 17 years.
Next Tuesday.
And we do not control, a large part of the country, and it's not working. So is the thinking that something is going to change, or why are we continuing to do the same things over and over?
That is the definition of an insanity, to do the same thing and expect a different result. Again, the president got bad advice. He was only given the option of more money and more troops or pull out completely. If we do pull out completely, it will become a terror superstate because the Taliban, the ISIS have the ability to, right now they're making about $600 million a year between illegal drug sales and illegal mining. The 9/11 attack only cost $500,000, but we need to, as a country, have a sustainable an effective program going forward. And with the thousands, the 15,000 U.S. troops that are there, the 30,000 contractors in country is not working. We've recommended a much smaller, a much more unconventional approach, really that goes back to what worked after 9/11, which is a CIA-led, very small team, very fast, very maneuverable, not a big plotting conventional approach. Right now, we're spending $62 billion. Even some of the staff in the White House are lying to the president. They're saying, oh, we're only spending $15 billion. No, you can look in the overseas contingency funding bill of the Pentagon. They're spending 49 plus 17 in base support for their efforts in Afghanistan, and it's wrong, and it's a much cheaper way to do that. For all the talk about Pakistan abusing the United States, it's true, but because of the Pentagon's very thirsty, very hungry footprint, we can never actually choke off Pakistan because they can choke off our supply lines. So the president should appoint a special presidential envoy, effectively a bankruptcy trustee. The president understands how to restructure basically bankrupt, failing situations. He needs to do that in this situation, give that envoy the Title 50 authorities, just like the CIA had when they went into Afghanistan after 9/11, and work this thing out. Now, there is a new commander going in who is a guy with a special operations background. That is a very good step, but the president can bolster that and have one person that reports to him to unify the multi-headed hydra of U.S. government policy and fix this. I know the president's frustrated. He asks about it all the time, I'm told. And it's time for the president to take a different path and solve and end this longest war in America. There are Americans dying there now who were toddlers or not even born when the Twin Towers fell 17 years ago.
Very quickly, is it true that other countries have secured mineral rights in Afghanistan as we've poured billions into that country?
A lot of countries have secured mineral rights, but there's actually very little legal mining going on. The Taliban and ISIS are doing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of illegal mining because, again, as a country, we haven't advanced the rule of law into these areas to prevent actual legitimate investment. But if we go with a small, unconventional footprint, we can put this thing back on track.
And, of course, we're getting nothing out of it, as usual.
We're standing by, Mr. President.
Thank you for keeping up with this.
You bet.
I hope that happens. Good to see you. We've told you many times about how the people who run our country are ignoring the threat of China, or in some cases actively assisting its rise because they're getting rich doing it. But what is the reverse like? How do Chinese elites regard our country and the Trump administration? We've got insight into that. It's fascinating. Stay tuned. Back to our Inside the Issues special hour. The people who run this country are obsessed with Russia. We hear that every day. Weirdly, they prefer to ignore China, at least in public. In private, they're taking a lot of money from China. But what do China's leaders think about us? Well, it turns out they think a lot about Donald Trump and his tough posture on trade. Are they impressed? Well, we asked Michael Pillsbury. He is director of the Center on Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute and a frequent traveler to China. He's also the author of maybe the single best book on the subject, The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. Michael Pillsbury, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
There was a surprising piece written by a Chinese expert in the Financial Times recently that described the Chinese leadership's view of Donald Trump. And it came as, I think, something as a surprise if you follow the news coverage of Trump in this country. It said, essentially, Chinese leadership believes that our president is playing a kind of three-dimensional chess. He's a brilliant tactician, and that they fear he's outflanking them strategically. Do you think that's right?
Yes, I was in Beijing a week ago, and I think I heard pretty much the same thing, that they think President Trump is basically the superior president out of the last 5 or 6 that's ever dealt with China. And that he's done the most to alter the relationship. He's really got their attention. They're quite concerned that there's something deeper going on than they're aware of. So you get this sense that the Chinese leadership and the advisors to the leadership are afraid of being outsmarted by President Trump.
It's a little odd from a non-expert's point of view because it doesn't seem like his posture has been that aggressive. Is it just that he's the only president to fight back at all? Or do they think more is coming?
Both. I think he's distinguished himself as fighting back at all, number one. Number two, the details and the depth of his allegations in these several White House reports he's released are really quite stunning to the Chinese. He's basically alleging that they stole their way to the top. They've had forcible technology transfers from U.S. companies, these outright stolen technology, and that they sort of have an illegitimate path to be number 2 in the world. That he would say these kinds of things, especially this term he's used in some reports, economic warfare, that China is committing economic warfare against America and other countries. This is really quite astonishing to them. They're used to being, if you will, coddled or spoken politely to. So this is really quite a shock. And it's working, I think.
Do they agree with the assessment fundamentally? When you speak to them candidly, do they acknowledge that there is some truth in the president's description of their behavior?
No, they're quite firm that this is all lies, defamation. The American companies who've testified to our trade representative's office over the last 6 months are all, making up stories. They're adamant, denying everything. And this, frankly, Tucker, makes it awfully hard to negotiate. They haven't met us not even halfway. They haven't met us 1/4 of the way yet. So I'm pessimistic in the short term. Obviously, if President Xi and President Trump get together again, if the terms are right, then some kind of a deal could be struck. But I think we're a long way from that.
Do you think that so far this change in our attitude toward China has helped the United States? Have we gotten something out of this?
Well, it's kind of a strange reaction, but we've certainly got the attention of the European Union. The European Union Commissioner, Mr. Juncker, came here not less than a month ago and now wants to work toward zero subsidies and zero tariffs with the United States. This, too, Tucker, is stimulating paranoia in China. They now are beginning to think that President Trump is so smart, as you say, playing three-dimensional chess, that he has got the Europeans on his side. And they've issued a set of warnings just in the past week to the Europeans not to fall for President Trump's trap.
I mean, is there something kind of wonderfully amusing about this story, or is it just me?
It's partly just you, but don't forget, you want to see some change and some aggressive steps, and the president has certainly done that. I think the next step is going to be to see what the first Chinese offer will be after these 2 months now of basically no contact. They've been making hints. They've dropped a couple of hints in newspapers recently that they're willing to renegotiate investment terms with us. They're willing to say that there may have been some minor violations by a few Chinese companies or local provinces, but certainly the center, the Communist Party and President Xi, never did anything wrong. So we haven't come very far, but yes, I think it's refreshing to see this level of respect for the United States. I haven't seen it in 40 years. Usually the Chinese look down on us as not being very bright.
Yes. And for good reason. Michael Pillsbury, thank you for that perspective. It's great.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, tonight we